Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, it is time for the sequel. If you don't know what I'm talking about, so I actually made a list of plant advice from back in the day during the Panini era when everyone was a plant expert and were giving plant advice willy-nilly on the internet. I went on a retrospective investigative deep dive and I came up with a list of six of the really popular plant advice from back in the day that in retrospect have aged terribly. That video, you guys are absolutely loving it, you're eating it up, and you have appealed that I make a sequel. So why am I to deny my audience what they love to watch? So yes, we are back with a sequel, darlings. In this note, I have six more plant advice from back in the day that, in my opinion, in my humble opinion, and in my experience, and retrospectively, they're sort of like they're not giving what they're supposed to give anymore. I should say though that when I went on an investigative deep dive into the history of this plant advice, I came to realize that a lot of them were actually cautionary measures, because back then during the Panini era, so many people got into plants for the first time. So a lot of the advice coming back then were just cautionary, beginner friendly measures to prevent overwatering. Now there's nothing exactly wrong with that actually, but the problem, however, is that it has become like standard, right as rain advice. It has now been accepted as standard advice without the nuance that this was actually made for like beginners. And as you get more experience, you begin to realize that some of this advice, although they are cautionary to prevent overwatering, they may not necessarily be the best for your plants or for your growing conditions or even the current phase in your life that you're in, which is why videos like this are necessary. So without much ado, please grab your coffee, grab your notes, grab something, and let's get to the nitty-gritty, darlings. The first one is going to leave a lot of people clutching at their pearls, because even till today this advice is still being given out. It is, when you are reporting a plant, always report an inch or two wider. So always move that plant to a pot that is an inch or two wider. Okay, so on paper it seems like very harmless advice, and it can actually be very good advice. Look, if you are a beginner or if you're somebody who struggles a lot with overwatering, then this could potentially be really good advice for you. Also, if you happen to live in a climate where it is really cold and you guys have very long winters, so the soil tends to dry out a lot slower, then this could be actually really good advice for you, because plants in smaller pots generally tend to dry out a lot faster and you're less likely to encounter overwatering. However, I have come to find out that this advice can actually end up being redundant and even impede the growth of your plant, while also potentially wasting your time. Stay with me here. I'm going to give you some practical examples. For example, if you live in a climate that has a very long growing season, I live in the tropical part of the world, like plants grow pretty much every single time of the year. Your plants are going to outgrow their pots really fast. That 1 inch wider, that 2 inch wider, you will find that in 3 months, in 6 months, they have outgrown their pots. And you're going to keep repeating the circle over and over again. As I have gotten older, 40 is around the corner. I keep saying this. As I've gotten older in life, I've come to realize I do not like to participate in things that waste my time. I don't want to have to keep reporting a plant every 3 working days. So these days, I go 4 inch wider, 6 inch wider. Dare I say even 10 inch wider. This is also true if you live in a sunny hellfire climate where it dries out really fast. You will find that this advice will just be giving you too much work. What a lot of people do in this part of the world is they plant in big pots. This is also especially true if you're growing your plants outdoors in a really sunny climate. You're going to quickly realize that keeping these plants in these small pots and moving them 1 inch, 2 inch, 3, you're gonna realize that you're just wasting your time. The plants will be drying out really fast, and the plants will get root bound really quickly. So you see what I mean? Some of this advice in theory aren't actually like bad advice, but you need to adapt it to your own climate, to your own experience, to your own growing conditions. Now the problem is that this advice is being passed on as standard advice, and because of the influence, my American girlies, I don't think you guys realize just how influential things from America can be to other parts of the world. Now, because of the influence that American media has, this sort of advice, even for people in my part of the world where, as I have explained, it can be detrimental and counterproductive, this sort of advice is being passed as the standard and the right advice. I'm here to tell you that that's not the case. This next one was also a very popular reporting tip for back in the day. In fact, till this day, a lot of people still give out this advice, and I feel like this one applies regardless of whether you're growing your plants in the northern hemisphere, southern hemisphere, in the forest, in the bush, wherever you are. A reevaluation of this advice will come in handy for you. Now, it was common knowledge and back then that when you start seeing the root of your plants come out of the drainage hole like this, once you start seeing it, then therefore your plant needs to be reported. Darlings, no. Some plants honestly just have very extensive root systems that just like to go downwards. This is especially true if you're somebody who bottom waters a lot. If you're somebody who bottom waters or waters very deeply, what you're gonna have is a healthy root system that sometimes will even poke out of the drainage hole of your plant. But that doesn't mean, my loves, that plant needs to be reported. Okay, calm down. A surefire way that your plant needs to be reported is actually observing how fast that plant has started to dry in that pot. If I start to notice that this plant is drying a lot faster than usual and there isn't any change in the weather, and it's not suddenly sunnier, that is usually a great indication that, okay, this babe has outgrown her pot and she needs to be watered. Also, if I start to notice that the new leaves coming out of the plant are becoming a lot smaller and smaller, and I have been fertilizing cysts just as regularly, then that is also a sign that perhaps this plant needs to be reported as well. Another sign is, and this is a very common one, if the new leaf starts to come out really malformed, it's starting to come out malformed, it's getting a bit more stuck to the, the root sheet, then that could be a sign, that could be a better sign that, oh my goodness, this babe needs a new pot. However, if that plant has been in the same pot for a while, and yes, you can still see the roots poking out of the pot, but she's still growing, she's still doing her thing, her growth rate hasn't reduced, the size of her new leaves haven't reduced, then you don't need to report the plant. Leave sis be. Actually, one thing I've realized, and I feel like I need to make a separate video about this. There are certain things we do as plant people that I feel like we need to free ourselves from the shackles of. One thing I've realized is that you actually don't even need to sometimes report a plant to a bigger pot, even if they need a report. Think about it. Are you going to keep reporting your plant every time? Are you going to keep report every single plant you'll be reporting it? Don't you ever at a point reach a limit where you're like, I like the way this plant is, I don't want it to grow any bigger, so therefore let me just leave her the way she is? Don't you ever? But let's not digress. So yes, that advice where once you start seeing the roots come out of the hole of a girl, in most cases that honestly doesn't mean that the plant is root bound. As usual, like I like to say, this is an open forum, so do you agree with me? Do you disagree? Let me know in the comments. Let's continue this conversation in the comments as usual, okay? Now this next one, also please subscribe If you have not hit the, if you are, oh Jesus, subscribe right now if you've not subscribed. Thank you. So this next one, and I want you to hold my hand because I feel this one is a bit controversial. Yeah, and still has a lot of you on a chokehold. It had me on a chokehold for a long time. In fact, I just freed myself from that chokehold this year, actually. So the advice is you should cut out the inflorescence of your plants, particularly if you are not growing them for their flowers. Now, the rationale behind that, let's keep our hands, let's keep holding our hands, please, okay? The rationale behind that is that the inflorescence will reduce the growth, the foliage growth of that plant, and the plant will spend more of its energy on the flowers than the leaf. Okay, you can let go of my hand. For a very long time, I believed that this was the case, but one thing I have come to realize as an experienced elderly in this hobby, and as somebody who has toured several people's collections, toured several people's gardens, you know, one thing I've come to realize is that it doesn't really make a difference. Honestly speaking, loves, it doesn't really make a difference. That is the truth of the matter. I have been to certain people's collections, I've been to certain people's homes, and I have seen their anthuriums, their allocations, they're heavy with inflorescences, or I think, is that the term? Inflorescences, one of the two. I've seen it, and their plants still look very lush and very healthy. Someone actually challenged me because I advised her that why don't you cut out the inflorescence of your aglonema? And someone challenged me, one of my plant friends, one of my elderly plant friends, again, like we talked about in our previous videos, these elderly plant people, these older plant people, they are so full of wisdom. Honestly, they are so full of wisdom. Anyway, she said something. She was like, these plants that grow in the wild, in the forest, in the rainforest, does anyone cut that inflorescence? No one cuts that inflorescence. They have the inflorescence and it stays there, and after it dries off, it falls off and the plant doesn't die. So why are we trying to go against nature? And I thought, this actually made a whole lot of sense. So I feel like out of habit, and also because I do not like to see the inflorescence for a lot of these aeroids, they look quite ugly to me, I out of habit will cut it from time to time. But these days, sometimes I even forget that, oh my god, this aglonema has so many inflorescence, yet I've noticed it hasn't impeded the growth in one shape or form. So honestly speaking, whether you cut the inflorescence or not, it really doesn't make a difference. Leaving the inflorescence of your aeroids doesn't seem to actually lead to the decline. It does not, from what I've seen. But I'm also curious to know your thoughts on this. What has been your experience, darlings? Please let me know. Have you also noticed that it doesn't make a difference? Or in your case, has it made a difference? Has it led to more foliage growth, or has it done the opposite? Let us know in the comments. As usual, come and spill the tea. Now this next one, this is the one that I can very, very categorically, no one can change my mind, because I have experienced this firsthand. No one can change my mind about it. And I'm here to free a lot of you from the shackles, because I see some of your collections and I see that this advice is still holding your collection down. It's the culprit, it's the main reason why your plants look like a hot mess. It is that terracotta pots. Terracotta pots are the better option. There are people till today that are advising that you should opt for growing your plants in terracotta pots than plastic. Please, this could be one of your plant's best friends or one of your plant's biggest enemy, this terracotta pot. And in a lot of cases, especially where they are not used properly, This is what is killing your plants, terracotta pots. In fact, I have an entire video expose that I made a while back. I'm going to link it on why you should not use terracotta pots. I love the look of terracotta. I just love there's a certain rustic, earthy, organic element to it. Also, terracotta pots are more sustainable and they are better for the environment. They are more biodegradable, all that good stuff. But the thing about terracotta pots is that, especially the unglazed ones are the culprits. They are very, very porous, so water seeps out of it from the pores or from the surface of that plant. Consequence of that is that plants in terracotta dry out really, really fast, which does actually reduce the chance of overwatering, but it drastically increases the chance of underwatering. Now, this is why terracotta pots have to be used with caution. That advice that says terracotta pot is the best for your plant and it's better than plastic, please, that advice is wrong. Using terracotta pot should depend on the type of plant you're using it for, your type of person. Are you an overwaterer? Are you an underwaterer? Are you a frequent traveler? If you're somebody who travels frequently, if you're a busy girly of society, the last thing you should get is a terracotta pot. You should instead get ceramic or plastic. That advice is not a one size fits all. Please, if you live in a sunny country, if you live in a country where there's hellfire. I saw a comment the other day from someone who lives in Oman, and I was like, oh my goodness gracious, this video actually reaches people that live in Oman. Yes, someone lives in Oman that has a very dry climate, and she was talking about why she stopped using chunky soil. So you see why this advice needs to always be taken with caution and adapted to your environment. And I talked about this before. I don't think American content creators, American influencers, sort of like know the global impacts that they have. So when they are giving this sort of like advice, always contextualize it. Someone that lives in Scotland, for example, where it's always, I'm guessing it's very wet and cold and drab. Shout out to my Scotland girlies, how you doing? So someone that lives in Scotland, for example, yes, terracotta pots can be your best friend and typically will be recommended. But if you live in Oman, what are you doing with terracotta pots? If you live in Saudi Arabia, this terracotta pots could end up being your plant's worst enemy. So please, anyone that tells you, oh, switch to terracotta, switch to watch my video. That video was extremely detailed and I exposed terracotta pots for what they really are. Watch that video and then decide for yourself, based off of your lifestyle, your growing conditions, your environment, your climate, whether terracotta pots are good for you or not. I feel like this next point as well is also something, and I saw someone giving this advice again recently, and I was like, Jesus Christ, is this 2020? Why are you still giving this advice again? You will see that a lot of the advice back then was just based out of caution, based out of fear of overwatering, a fear and a misunderstanding of overwatering. As we've come to establish here, overwatering is not the volume of water, it is the frequency of water and a host of other factors. But let's not digress. The advice is always lean towards underwatering than overwatering. Always lean towards underwatering. It is best to underwater your plant than to overwater your plant. Wrong. Absolutely wrong. Even under instances of plants that are drought tolerant, even under instances of plants that thrive off neglect, absolutely most plants, in fact the only plant that I will say falls under this rule, as somebody who has killed this plant on several locations, the only plant I can think about is maybe a ZZ plant. This baby here is one of the few exceptions, but most plants, when you water them regularly, they thrive. They thrive. Any plant that you underwater more of, even if it's a succulent. I don't think you guys understand that succulents actually like regular watering, frequent and regular waterings. They grow like crazy. I have a thriving succulent collection as well, so I'm telling you for a fact that watering your plants regularly and not subjecting them to drought will make them thrive. Leaf production actually requires moisture, requires water. So if you're not watering that plant regularly, if you're underwatering, if your default go-to is to underwater, some of you, especially those that have snake plants, oh Jesus, if you're still underwatering your snake plants, then you're clearly a newbie, because we've debunked that a long time ago. The snake plants actually love moisture. Then I remember back then I used to watch a lot of snake plant care videos. They will tell you, wait until the new leaves of your snake plant have wilted. Once you see that the leaves have wilted, then you can water. Hello, please don't do that. Please, under no circumstances should you do that for your snake plant and for a lot of your plants. It will stunt their growth. That's why some of you, your plants look terrible. They've not grown. They look like a hot mess because you are underwatering instead of overwatering. That's it. I'm not saying you should be watering your plants every 5 minutes. Water when they have dried. It's that simple. Some plants love to even stay moist. Water once you see that the soil has dried, water it. You don't have to leave it for another 2-3 years because the plant is drought tolerant. But once you see the soil has dried, water that babe. Give it a deep watering. Once you constantly keep that regular routine of, oh, my plant has dried, let me water her immediately, your plants will always thrive. That advice of always underwater, leaning towards that you're operating from a place of fear. Any hobby where you're operating from a place of fear and from a place of caution is not the right hobby for you. Please go into something else. If you're always afraid to, whenever you want to water a plant, throw that plant away. That plant is not for you. Free yourself from the shackles of operating under a place of fear and caution. This hobby. This next one was very popular back in the day. You guys almost turned I and my plants, my American girlies, American influencers back in the day, I hold you responsible, American plant influencers. You guys almost turned me and my plants into vampires. You made it seem back in the day that like direct sun was the enemy, that your plants must not see direct sun. Your house plant, under no circumstances must you ever expose any house plant to direct sunlight. Don't you dare. You guys really made me really afraid of direct sunlight. I remember I was having a conversation with someone back then. I still remember this conversation because, oh my God, we were really living and operating in fear. And she was like, her gliomas are stretching, they're not doing so well. And I told her that, see, my gliomas were not doing so well until I started giving them a bit more direct morning sunlight. And she was like, Jesus, direct morning, is she going to burn their gliomas? Aren't they going to burn? I said, morning sunlight is fine. She was like, are you sure? I was like, just morning sunlight. That was how we were afraid of direct sunlight. Now, granted, I live in a country that the sun is hellfire. You guys have heard me slander the Nigerian sun for good reason, because she has fried and burnt so many of my plants, even recently. But that doesn't mean that all forms of direct sunlight are evil. Morning direct sunlight, especially early morning direct sunlight, if you live in a hellfire country, please don't stretch it beyond that. Early morning direct sunlight, beautiful, does wonders for your plants. Your plants absolutely grow. Late evening direct sunlight, beautiful. Also the direct sunlight that comes in indoors, it's a lot much milder, much beautiful, and your plants will be more vivid, more colorful, they grow more. Also, I've come to realize I've come to realize that in lots of these house plants back then, they just used to make every house plant feel like it hated direct sunlight. But I've come to realize a lot of these house plants can actually take direct sunlight and even prefer even intense direct sunlight. So please, in as much as a lot of house plants prefer shaded conditions, some actually prefer filtered, mild morning direct sunlight, and don't shy away from that. Okay, you're not a vampire and neither are your plants. So again, this hobby, if you're operating under fear in this hobby, fear and anxiety in this hobby, then you need to reevaluate. You need to honestly reevaluate and start freeing yourself from the shackles. This hobby, everything should be a learning experience. If, for example, you decide, okay, let me put this plant under direct sun and see how it fares, and it burns, you've learned from that experience. You've learned, okay, maybe this is a plant that doesn't like direct sunlight, or maybe I should acclimate it. Not that you're like, oh my God, I would never. Oh, I hate direct sunlight. Oh, gee. No. That's not a healthy way to go about this or any hobby at all. Okay? So yeah, darlings, I think we've exhausted our list. I wrote a total of 12. I did 6 the previous one. I'm doing 6 more. Depending on how you guys receive this video, I might go on a deeper investigative dive and come up with perhaps 12 more and do a part 3. Let me know. I'm curious to know your thoughts in the comments. Do you agree with me on some of these points I have made? If you do, or even if you disagree, do let me know in the comments. Let's sound off in a respectful and demure way. And I hope you found this video enjoyable. If you did, like and share all that good stuff. Next week, you want to subscribe because next week we are embarking on a new series. I'm excited to begin this series with you next week. So do subscribe and I'll see you in the next one. Bye, my loves.